That day, though, did you and others have a sense that more could be coming, that more was intended and designed, or was it just that moment, that period of 6 seconds in American history, and
well,
then it was
you
over?
know, as reporters, we tend to concentrate on what's happening now and not thinking necessarily 1 or 2 days down the road. I think we were sufficiently overwhelmed with the facts and trying to determine what happened and what was going on. Where was Oswald? He was finally brought into the police department, the city jail. We saw him 4 times during that period in which he brushed shoulders with me and other reporters as we jockeyed for a position on a very narrow hallway as they brought him down from upstairs the jail to the interrogation room. We were caught up in a compendium of events that we couldn't predict. And then, of course, 2 days later, he was shot.
And of course, you were at that scene as well. You were on the phone in a hallway as Oswald was let in, and then he was shot. And tell us about your impressions from that moment.
Well, ABC had a great affiliate there, but in those days, an affiliate, if they had one remote unit, live remote unit, that was really something. FAA in Dallas had a really good remote unit, but our bosses in New York had to decide where they're going to put the remote unit. Is it going to be at the city jail, where he's simply coming down, Oswald's coming down the elevator, gets in a car and drives to Dealey Plaza, which is the county jail, which is where the textbook depository building is located. Well, that's a no-brainer. So the remote unit was not put in the basement of the police department. It was, in fact, put in Dealey Plaza. And so I was there. Remember something called a telephone booth?
Mm-hmm. We do.
Well, I was in a telephone booth with a 12-inch cord, and I saw Oswald come out of the elevator and then go out of my sight. And then he was behind some policemen, so I was behind the action, 15 to 20 feet away. I heard a shot, and I said, "We've got to get on the air." Well, that's a double-edged sword. Suddenly we're on the air, but I can't see what's happening because the police have crowded around Oswald. And I realized that this is probably the end of my career because I'll say something really horrendously wrong. So we were all very cautious. We were very tentative. And finally, my cameraman, who was out front filming it, came back and filled me in. And sure enough, Oswald had been shot, as I said on the live coverage, something that the Dallas police had feared might happen.
It's a remarkable
but they didn't
accounting.
think it would happen there.
He's the Secretary of Defense and therefore is in charge of Arlington National Cemetery. He knows the Kennedys want Robert Kennedy buried there near his brother. Johnson actually asked Clifford if there's any way in which he can deny.
Already at half-staff in memory of the late President of the United States. This moment of silence will be a powerful moment of silence all across the country, indeed around the world. You can't overstate the affection the American people have for President Kennedy. Just take a look at this brand new CNN ORC poll. It shows 90% of Americans today approve of the way Kennedy handled his job as president. No other past president even comes close.
The operating room. You always think of her, or somebody like her, as being insulated, protected, sort of on Olympus. She was quite alone. I don't think I ever saw anybody so much alone in my life. I went up to her, put my arms around her, and said something I'm sure it was quite banal, like, "God help us all," because my feelings for her were too tumultuous to put into words.
So much packed into that also, and as you wrote in The Passage of Power, she knew how important it was that John Connally had also been.
And historians at the time, journalists at the time, folks at the time, certainly nowhere near that kind of approval. But 50 years later, people look back and they obviously like him and admire him.
Well, I think he stands for his generation, the GI generation, the greatest generation. He stands for a different time in American politics and American life, which in many ways now looks like an age of innocence, but it was an age in which we all shared a belief in the ideals of America, in the purpose of America, both at home and abroad. and he embodied that. He desperately wanted to make peace in the Cold War, and he took some big steps towards doing that. At the same time, he wanted to find new national enterprises that we could go on that would make us proud and bring us together, and the Moon program was the best example of that. I think there is a sense that in some ways, at least, we have not had as capable a president as him in the years since. And again, I think that the nostalgia for him among people your age and mine and older, Wolf, is that he represents an America when our political system worked much better than it does now, when the nation had common values to an extent that it does not have now, and when we could solve problems in a way that we're having a great deal of difficulty doing now.
Yeah, the color
Wolf,
guard.
if I could just
hold on one second, Gerald. I just want to tell our viewers what they're seeing. The color guard with bagpipes entering Dealey Plaza for this memorial service at the bottom of the hour. Once again, there will be that moment of silence. David McCullough will also read from some of the more memorable moments of President Kennedy's speeches as well. So we have a lot to look forward to. Hold on for a moment, Gerald, because I want to bring Jeff Greenfield into this conversation, our old friend. He's written an amazing new book entitled If Kennedy Lived, and it really is amazing. You learn a great deal about what potentially, Jeff, could have happened. But give us a thought or two right now as we remember this hour 50 years ago exactly when he was shot and killed.
Well, I think everybody will remember vividly where they were. The only comparable moment in recent American history would have been 9/11. For me, I was at the University of Wisconsin, where I edited the college paper. And I think one of the things that's important to remember is how literally unbelievable it was at a time when public violence was far less prevalent than it later became. It was a less violent media. It was
Jeff,
a less
hold on for a moment, because they're singing the national anthem. I want to make sure we listen to it.
Sure.
That our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Please be seated.
We're going to continue to watch this ceremony. There's a lot going on. All of our analysts, historians, journalists are standing by. Much more coverage right after this. Honoring the memory of President John F. Kennedy, and now at this special service in Dallas, the mayor of Dallas, Mike Rawlings, is speaking.
Had been taken from us, taken from his family, taken from the world. John Fitzgerald Kennedy's presidency, his life, and yes, his death, seemed to mythologically usher in the next 50 years. What ensued was 5 decades filled with other tragedies, turmoil, and great triumphs. We were all very young. Our lives in front of us. Dallas was very young as well, barely a century old. And given the nature of youth, we all felt invincible. Well, it seems that we all grew up that day, city and citizens, and suddenly we had to step up to trying to live up to the challenges of the words and visions of a beloved president. Our collective hearts were broken. Like so many of us who were too young to fully comprehend, I remember being called into the school gymnasium, hearing the terrible news, and told to go home. Stunned civic leaders at the trademark luncheon awaited a president who would never arrive. Crowds prayed outside Parkland Hospital. Traffic stopped in cities across the country as news spread from car to car. And the world grieved with us. Newspapers reported that flags were lowered to half-staff around the globe. Germans on both sides of the Berlin Wall placed lit candles in their windows. An 8-year-old Nigerian girl recited the entire inaugural address from memory as her father wept, just like the skies today. While the past is never in the past, this was a lifetime ago. Now, today, we, the people of Dallas, honor the life, legacy, and leadership of the man who called us to think not of our own interest, but of our country's. We give thanks for his life and his service. We offer condolences to his family, especially his daughter Caroline, on this difficult day. We pay tribute to an idealist without illusions who helped build a more just and equal world. We salute a commander-in-chief who stared down a nuclear threat to this country. We praise a writer who profiled true courage and modeled it himself. We applaud a visionary who created a corps of young Americans to promote peace around the globe. We stand in awe of a dreamer who challenged us to literally reach for the moon, though he himself would not live to see us achieve that goal. Other goals were even tougher, have taken longer to reach, and we, the United States, still struggle towards some even as we speak, as do we here in Dallas. But we're fortified by the knowledge that we have always had big goals and big aspirations in this city, set by our founding fathers like John Neely Bryan and George Dealey, the namesake of this plaza, re-energized by Mayor Eric Johnson, the mayor who led Dallas in the post-assassination years. These 5 decades have seen us turn civic heartbreak into hard work. They've seen us go from youthful invincibility to existential vulnerability to greater maturity as a city and a community. On the 1-year anniversary of the assassination of the late Rabbi Levi Olin of Temple Emmanuel, one of our city's greatest spiritual leaders, gave voice to Dallas's communal pain unleashed on that day. Rabbi Olin said then, quote, "Contrary to the impassioned judgment of that horrible moment, the city is not guilty of the crime, but in those awesome days following the assassination, the most powerful searchlight man possesses was focused on this city. Every flaw, every raw spot, every wrinkle, and every uncleanness was put under a microscope and shown to the world." He continued, "The city of rich palaces and tall towers of commerce were set amidst slums and hovels. As the powerful light shone upon it, the city, it was learned, had been inhospitable to honorable debate," end quote. Rabbi Olin captured the heartbreak and hurt the city felt. He stated plainly the defects and failings that were laid bare before the entire world. But most important, he called for Dallas to use this tragedy to seek a true transformation. Look around today. I believe we have heeded that call. The people of this city have been filled with a sense of industry born of tragedy, driven to improve the substance of Dallas, not just the image of it. Today, because of the hard work of many people, Dallas is a different city. I believe the new frontier did not end that day on our Texas frontier. And I hope that President Kennedy would be pleased with our humble efforts towards fulfilling our country's highest calling, that of providing the opportunity for all citizens to exercise those inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The city of Dallas will continue on that course. The man we remember today gave us a gift that will not be squandered. He and our city will forever be linked. In tragedy, yes, but out of that tragedy, an opportunity was granted to us. The chance to learn how to face the future when it's the darkest and the most uncertain. How to hold high the torch even when the flame flickers and threatens to go out. As the people of Dallas did then, each of us will meet our oncoming. We will meet the future with the same vigor, optimism, and unfailing sense of duty that our young president embodied. President Kennedy brought us that message. In his pocket, down that street, on November 22nd, 1963. That message was to be delivered a few miles away in a speech to Dallas leaders following his parade. It was a speech he never got to make. But those unspoken words resonate far beyond the life of the man. To commemorate that day and those words, we are unveiling a memorial right here in this historic plaza. It is inscribed with the last lines of his undelivered speech and will serve as a reminder and a permanent monument to President Kennedy's memory. I leave you with those resonant words. We in this country, in this generation, are by destiny rather than choice the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and our responsibility, that we may exercise our strength with wisdom and restraint, and that we may achieve in our time and for all time the ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. That must always be our goal, and the righteousness of our cause must always underlie our strength. For as was written long ago, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in a moment of silence in honor of the life of John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
The U.S. Navy Choir saluting the Navy veteran, President John F. Kennedy. And let us set the scene in real time. 50 years ago, at this very moment, of course, the motorcade had sped up behind us on their way to Parkland Hospital. The president was pronounced dead a half hour later. And here in Dealey Plaza, there was bedlam as a national audience, on radio at first, but then on television, started hearing the news. The president, Governor Connolly, had been hit, and then the awful confirmation came a few minutes later. Here's how it aired on NBC News with anchor Frank McGee on the phone with Robert McNeil.
White House Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff has just announced that President Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, which is about 35 minutes ago.
After being shot at.
After being shot.
By an unknown assailant.
By an unknown assailant.
During a motorcade drive through downtown Dallas.
During a motorcade drive through downtown Dallas.
Frank McGee, of course, Chet Huntley alongside him there. Such a searing moment that for all these remaining generations, if you were alive in America on that day, the question has always been, where were you? That theme, that idea is at the heart of a documentary we will air tonight, hosted by Tom Brokaw, who joins us from our NBC studios. And Tom, the question at this moment, this eerie moment here in Dealey Plaza, how did this change our country?
Well, obviously, John F. Kennedy was a perfectly cast president for a new age. It was the television age in America. He was charismatic. He was generational. He talked about the possibilities of going to the moon and having a Peace Corps. And with three cracks of rifle fire, we had Lyndon Johnson as the president, a more traditional pol. We had already started to get involved in Vietnam. Johnson took us much deeper into Vietnam. He did some good things. He got the Civil Rights Bill passed. He had the war on poverty, which still has a mixed record. So history can be fickle, as you well know, Brian. And in that moment, when John F. Kennedy was removed from the scene,